Yeah, we did now.
Yeah, no, I've gone out to.
Alrighty, that is the sound we like to hear. That means that the Zoom webinar is theoretically working. I'm going to go ahead and let folks kind of trickle in and get seated, and then I'll get us kicked off and talking about this book. My name is Brittany. I am a community library specialist here at Corvallis-Benton County Public Library. Please bear with me. I have to remember how to project through a mask, and I'm recovering off of an almost 2-week illness, so I may be a little breathy. So just bear with me. Thank you everyone for being here today. It's not a horrible day out for middle of November, so I appreciate you being here for us. I'd also like to thank the Random Review Committee. That's our group that meets once a year to select books and reviewers for this 10-month-long series. That meeting is like 5 hours long, and we go around a circle and we discuss all the reasons we should or shouldn't use a book, and it's a lot of fun. There were snacks this year. So thank you guys. Also, thank you to Gary Whitehouse for writing our wonderful press releases. And thank you to Gail Gerdeman for building our book lists. We really appreciate that. Also, big thank you to the Friends and Foundation of the Library for their co-sponsorship and support of Random Review. If you don't know, the Friends not only founded and ran the Random Review series for 30 years, they also coordinate and run the book sales whose funds benefit the library and support us in so many ways. You can learn more about becoming a friend and or volunteer opportunities at their website, cbcplfriendsandfoundation.org. We also have a Random Review webpage on the library website where you can go back and listen or watch to past random reviews. So that's a good resource for you to use to see what else we've talked about over that long history. Now, I am here to introduce to you our speaker today, Carly Solstrom. Carly envisions and builds programs, nurtures collaborations, and supports thinkers and creatives. Since 2006, she has worked with Spring Creek Project to develop residencies, fellowships, workshops, symposia, speaker series, films, and podcasts. She thrives at intersections, places where ideas and peoples and disciplines come together to imagine new stories and solutions to the world's most pressing problems. She swims whenever she gets the chance, no matter how cold the water. Please join me in welcoming Carly to the stage.
How's that volume back there? You hear me okay? Okay, if it changes, just let me know. Thanks so much, and thanks for inviting me, all library folks here, to do a random review, especially of this book, Born of Fire and Rain by M.L. Herring, who those of us who know Peg know her as Peg Herring. And so I'm usually, as you can tell by this intro, I'm usually developing programs and do a very quick intro and then step aside so that someone else can speak about the work that they've been doing for their life. And so this is really a treat to get to talk about things that I care so deeply about and a place that I care so deeply about. And one of the things about this book is that it connects so much to so many other things that are happening in Corvallis, and I'll share a little bit about those as this hour goes by. For me, this is really at the intersection of the two positions that I hold. One of them, as Brittany mentioned, is directing the Spring Creek Project for Ideas, Nature, and the Written Word, and the other one is at PRAX, the Patricia Valian Resource Center for the Creative Arts at OSU, where I serve as the Director of Art, Science, Humanities, and Technology Integration. And this book is really a living example of what happens when someone devotes their career and thinking and creativity to that intersection. So I was first introduced to Peg's writing and illustrations many years ago through this book, which is on the back table. This is the cover of Ellie's log. And since then, our paths have crossed many times in art, science, and writing communities in Corvallis and beyond. And I'll share a little bit more about how those things have interwoven over the years. But first, I'd like to share a little bit about Peg. She has had what I think of as kind of a dream life career, and one that really fully embraces the advice to do what you love. She's a science writer, illustrator, educator, and ecologist. She writes on her website that she has always loved books and drawings. This is a quote: "I grew up with books on my mind and wind in my hair. I have kept an illustrated journal most of my life. The earliest were filled with sketches of animals and lists of what I wanted to do when I grow up." I'm gonna let the train, yeah, and I'll turn up, I'll try.
There they go.
Can I turn up? I just need to,
We can.
okay. We'll see, I'll put this closer. And we'll try turning up there too. How's that?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, with the train. So this piece actually is one that I'd like to come back to, continuing on that quote. Animal sketches have given way to other moments of observed wonder. And this observed wonder is really a thread throughout this book. And so now that the train has passed and the volume is up, I'll tell you a little bit more about Peg's career. She was part of the first class of women accepted to the University of Virginia, and she became fascinated with wetland ecology and with neurophysiology. She went on to land a job as a research biologist with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and she said, "I was given a uniform and a boat. It was heaven." Of course, there were things that were going on that were not heaven, and when salmon populations suddenly crashed, she decided to deepen her studies in science communication so that she could tell that and other really important stories, and she went on to study science communication at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and then landed this other job that I think also sounds like a dream. She worked for the University of California Natural Reserve System, where her job was to spend a few months with each of the university's 40 beautiful natural reserves and to record their research opportunities in words and pictures and to publish booklets about each one of those reserves. From that, she grew a freelance business called the Science Writers Group, in which she was the sole writer, illustrator, designer, and tech support. And she got to just, it sounds like, travel all around the US looking for groundbreaking science stories across the country. And so we here in Corvallis are really lucky that ultimately she joined the faculty at OSU as the head of the communications department with the College of Agricultural Sciences and the statewide extension and experiment stations program, where she worked for over 18 years. So this book, Born of Fire and Rain, is, I think, born of a lifetime of careful observation and inquiry and attention and love to our wild temperate rainforest. I'll share a number of passages throughout this review, but this one is from the very beginning, from the preface, to just situate us a little bit here. How's the volume back there? Good, okay. You are about to embark on an imagined expedition into America's temperate rainforest, at the tumultuous edge of a shifting continent in a precarious moment in time. You will peek behind the curtain of magnificent scenery into a forest of ancient trees, exploding mountains, disappearing owls, tsunamis, megafire, timber wars, salmon, epiphanies, 10 million people, and a lifetime of drawing pictures. And that's just scratching the surface. More than an episodic travelogue, this book takes you across scales from microscopic to planetary, underground, up in the air, and into places only your imagination can fit, to learn what it means to be a forest. At first, you will be awed by the obvious majesty of these giant moss-draped trees. You will witness the region's tumultuous human history and glimpse its possible future in a world of climate change, species extinction, and shifting environmental policies. In the end, you will emerge with mud on your boots and an expanded idea of what it means to be human in an ecological world. The illustrations in this book are from sketchbooks I have kept most of my life, not as a photographic record, but as a personal response to the world as I have experienced it. The sketches offer an alternate path into the rainforest, a slower path that allows you to stop for a moment, just as you might pause along a trail to glimpse a fleeting owl. At this particular moment, when the earth is shifting all around, there's a lot to learn about life in the wild forest ecosystem. I hope this imagined expedition will encourage you to explore the natural wonders in your own nearby forest with new awareness. And we're so lucky that this actually is our nearby forest. And so as I was thinking about and rereading this book, I was imagining that some of you might be wondering why you should read this book, or really any long-form science writing in these uncertain and unsettling times. And as I was thinking about why, a number of ideas came to me that this book is really good for us. And I'd like to share why I think this book is good for you and good for us in this brief time that we have together. So the first reason is that it's full of art. I asked Peg if she'd be willing to share images from the book, and she graciously said yes. So I'm sharing these with deep thanks to Peg and also to Yale University Press. What we know about art, what research is telling us and helping us understand more and more, is that when we view artwork that we find moving, it actively increases areas in our brain that are associated with pleasure and reward and meaning. We also are learning that drawing helps us pay attention. So when you look closely at drawings, especially handmade illustrations like the one that this book is full of, we unconsciously mirror the artist's gestures and lines. And this engages mirror neurons in our brains, which enhance empathy and understanding of intent. Research is also showing that emotional responses to art increase oxytocin and dopamine, and those are the neurochemicals linked to bonding and motivation. Viewing and discussing art lowers our stress hormones. It improves mood. It increases mindfulness, which is similar to what researchers call the awe response, a mix of wonder and calm that resets our nervous systems. And so I think just flipping through this book can be an invitation to that. Another reason that I think this book is good for us is this awe and wonder response. And Peg writes about this beautifully. I'm going to flip actually to the postscript to get us set up for this, but I think it really will sets the stage for the whole book. Art and science both begin with wonder. As a verb, wonder means to speculate, hypothesize, cogitate, observe. As a noun, wonder is related to awe, astonishment, mystery, magic. In both ways, a sense of wonder cultivates the ability to notice details and delight in discovery. Wonder puts art and science on the same adventurous path. True, the scenery of the temperate rainforest is wonderful to look at, with crystalline streams, volcanic towers, majestic moss-draped trees. However, entering the forest with some understanding of how the ecosystem actually lives allows you to become part of something much bigger than scenery. Knowledge redoubles wonder and prepares you for discovery. Details emerge, patterns come to light. Suddenly, the scenery materializes into a story with subplots of ecosystem relationships, character, drama, and intrigue. Science deals with things that can be named, measured, or compared. Art deals with things that can be seen, expressed, or remembered. Science tests its interpretations against natural laws. Art is open to a viewer's interpretation. Humans have a knack for both science and art, for being both rational and irrational, deliberate and spontaneous, analytical and imaginative. We strive for certainty but live with ambiguity. At any moment of any day, anywhere, you can take the measure of your feelings, check the pulse of history, imagine a thing beyond your ability to quantify. Isn't that wonderful? And the book is full of these moments of wonder that invite you in to wonder about the forest. And there's also this growing body of research that tells us what happens to us when we have those moments of awe and wonder. Wonder increases well-being and pro-social behaviors like feeling of connectivity and generosity and humility. It helps us with memory retention and a greater ability to connect facts to larger meanings. Wonder has been linked to an ethic of care, so it awakens responsibility in us, not just admiration of a thing. And in neuroscience, wonder appears to activate both the default mode network and the attention networks in our minds, which is this really rare combination that blends focus and openness. And cultivating wonder is correlated to a lifelong of learning, creativity, and resilience. And I would say that those are things, those traits are central to living through these really uncertain times. And so with art and wonder as our guide, Peg invites us to journey into the wild temperate rainforest. It's an invitation to really dwell in awe and wonder. And I'd like to share a couple passages that kind of set us up for that a little bit more. This is from the very beginning. And here we are. Here you are. Standing halfway between the equator and the North Pole, squeezed between the Cascade volcanoes and the Pacific Ocean, trees tower like skyscrapers above you. A carpet of moss softens your path. An evergreen scent wreathes the air. It's raining, of course. This is part of the Pacific temperate rainforest, the largest temperate rainforest in the world, stretching from the giant cedars of southeast Alaska to the giant coast redwoods in Northern California. This narrow ribbon of rainy forest has a distinctively benign climate for trees to grow very big and very old. The Pacific temperate rainforest is completely unlike the drier interior forests that spread across most of Western North America. Giant conifers dominate this landscape, much like on Earth in the time of dinosaurs. Conifers, cone-bearing trees, are a holdover from a time before flowering plants, before the rise of mammals, before the continents drifted into their current location. The Pacific temperate rainforest is the only sizable region on Earth where conifers flourish as they did before the rise of flowering plants. When you walk among these trees, so huge and so ancient, it's easy to imagine a brontosaurus browsing the mid-canopy among trees 1,000 years old and 10 feet in diameter. And then, okay, I'll share this piece as well a little bit, just skipping ahead a little bit. It's a lively place. You are about to embark on an imagined expedition into this rainforest and its fiery origins, drenching rain, checkered history, and clouded future. As society grapples with how to think about forests, should we worship them or consume them, you will see how much is involved in just being a forest. The first thing you will notice is the enormous size of these trees. You will drift up into the canopy through masses of ferns, lichens, burrow down into soil through the hair-thin threads of fungi, and plunge headlong through the headwaters flushed with rain and snowmelt. You will experience the rainforest as it faces a shifting climate and the shifting priorities of a constantly changing society. You will travel across scales of microscopic to planetary and from moments to millennia, beyond the grind of latitude and longitude into places only your imagination can fit. And that is really what Peg does through this whole book, is this constant invitation into all of these different aspects of the forest. One of the central characters in this book is the Douglas fir, and I'd like to just share one or two paragraphs about this central character to give you a taste of the depth. Douglas firs make the most of low winter light, which is what we're all getting ready to do right now as well, or are doing. So Douglas firs make the most of low winter light with steep cone-shaped crowns that absorb slanting rays. Their evergreen needles are wrapped in weather-tight, waxy coats with very little freezable material inside. Breathing pores are tucked into a narrow groove in the needle's underside to keep moisture in. A mid-sized Douglas fir can have 60 million needles, and it can hold onto those needles for 7 years, reducing the energy needed to push out a handful of new foliage each spring. Most of the longest-lived conifers of the Pacific Northwest grow big relatively quickly with adaptations to protect themselves over the long haul. Big Doug firs, for example, shed lower branches to deter ground fires from laddering up to the crown, and they develop corky, fire-resistant bark up to 8 inches thick to rebuff all but the hottest fires. They carry a medicine chest of biochemicals that resist decay and harbor a friendly force to fungi and to help fight off pathogens. And they store a lot of water in their sapwood that helps moderate periods of drought. With such built-in defenses, these trees can live a long time, with centuries to develop a complex architecture that creates all sorts of habitats and natural communities above ground and below ground. This is the incredible work that Peg does throughout the book, is to invite us really deeply to get to know the species, the place, and the bigger picture. And so I think as I was reading this book, I often found myself in awe and wonder. But of course, the thing that is so important with books is how they live in us, right? When we continue on, when we put the book down. And I found the same thing happened when, I got to slip away and go on a hike, of just looking at and being in the forest in a different way. And I think that this book really is an invitation to do that as well. Another reason that I think this book is good for us. Let me see where, yeah, this is such a great illustration. Is that Peg reminds us again and again how interconnected our health is with the health of the forest. And again, there's this growing body of research showing that spending time in nature is profoundly beneficial to our brains and our bodies and our emotional well-being. It lowers stress and it supports mental health. Spending time in nature helps our overstimulated brains to rest and recover. It improves divergent thinking, so it improves creativity and insight, and it has benefits to our immune system and cardiovascular system and metabolic systems. And I'd like to share a couple moments where Peg makes these connections in the book. So they are moments, I think, also of wonder, but I think they're this invitation to remember too how connected we are. These are just short passages, and they're from all over. They're not in order that they appear in the book, but I'm going to just flip through all these Post-it notes and find them. Okay, so this one is about our breath. Your eyes might distinguish more than 1 million different colors, but your nose can distinguish more than 1 trillion different scents. Here in the forest, you breathe air perfumed with volatile hydrocarbons known as terpenes. Terpenes react with air to produce fragrant aerosols. Each species of tree has its own chemical identity. The greater the diversity within the forest, the more varied the biochemistry within this tide of atmospheric fragrance. Douglas fir has a notable fruity, resinous scent, while western red cedar smells like pineapple, and western hemlock smells like celery. Such chemicals help protect trees against invasions of bark beetles and other pathogens, but many have a sweeter effect on us. I'll skip ahead a little bit. A forest is a great place to go whenever you want to breathe. Several studies show how terpenes and other aerosols can inhibit inflammation from human disease such as bronchitis, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and osteoarthritis. Some of the cells that line the surface of your body are designed to absorb these aerosols. Some research theorizes that when we breathe in fresh forest air, we breathe in antibacterial and antifungal chemicals that plants use to ward off disease. And our bodies respond by increasing our own natural immunities. The Japanese practice of Shinrin Yoku oddly translates as forest bathing. It's touted to restore the physical and psychological health of humans through a 5 senses experience of the forest environment. It's more like breathing than bathing in the Western sense. Now that you're in the forest, slow down, breathe deep, and see if it works for you. So it's one of those connections. When I was coming in, I saw that there's a sign, a poster in the hallway for forest bathing that somebody's hosting. So there's a chance to, there's a QR code out there. I don't know who it is, but it looks like great. And then I also wanted to share another passage along these lines that is about seeing. Branches, ferns, leaves, river deltas, even the neurons in your brain display these infinitely complex patterns created by repeating one simple design over and over in an ongoing feedback loop. It is the basic growth pattern of trees, each branch splitting into even smaller branches, roots, twigs, leaves, and veins. The psychedelic paisley of fractal decorated the 1970s. Neon colors heightened their hallucinogenic effects. But the real beauty was to see slightly imperfect fractal patterns repeated in nature with mathematical patterns far outside the rectangular boxes of Euclidean geometry in our human-designed world. The zigzag patterns of coastlines, tree bark, clouds, and mountains seems random until you take a closer look. Then you see they are made of fundamental shapes repeatedly branching and folding. Large parts resemble smaller parts. As far as you zoom in, it's paisley all the way down. Fractals mapped what seemed like messiness in nature, and fractal geometry made sense of systems that are constantly adapting to their environments. It turns out those repeated fractal patterns of nature have positive effects on the human brain. Measured by electroencephalograms, when engaging in complex thought, our brains create a lightning storm of connections that organize spontaneously into fractal-like patterns of neural networks. And when presented with nature's fractal images, our brains register high alpha responses, an indicator of wakeful relaxation and attention. You know the feeling. I wonder how much we know that feeling right now, because I think it's a tough one to find, I think, often in the modern world. And so I love so much that as Peg is giving us this deep dive into forest ecology and also the history of the forest, that there is this invitation to remember that we really are connected with this landscape, that it is part of us, that it nurtures us, and that it's important to our well-being. And then just one other quick paragraph about this, because this is really fun, a little passage where Peg's talking about photosynthesis. Photosynthesis stores energy by remixing atmospheric carbon dioxide into carbohydrates. Respiration releases that stored energy through metabolism in daily rhythms of airflow and fat flow. Okay, so this basic of photosynthesis, and then skipping ahead. Similar to bacteria and lichens, these emerald green chloroplasts are descendants of bacteria that gave up their interdependence more than 1 billion years ago to relocate into plant cells. Now, consider this. Magnesium makes chlorophyll green. Iron makes hemoglobin blood red. Otherwise, the molecular structure of chlorophyll and hemoglobin are almost identical. Both are made of 4 elements: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, arranged in a circle around a hub. Chlorophyll, with its magnesium hub, captures light. Hemoglobin, with its iron hub, transports oxygen. Think about it. You might just be an atom away from photosynthesizing. And it's a fun thought experience, right? But I think it really does tell this story of connection. Okay, so the book is full of these moments. I mean, so full of these moments that I invite you to read it slowly and often to dip in different ways. But the other thing that Peg does in this book, that's a couple other things that are really important, is that she does a beautiful job of telling the story of the recent history of the forest, where science influences policy, and where social movements influence policy, where social, back and forth in so many different ways, including the Northwest Forest Plan, which many of you are familiar with, which was this landmark federal policy in 1994 that included the protection of old growth forests, wildlife habitat, especially the northern spotted owl, and ecosystem health across 24 million acres of public land in the Pacific Northwest. And of course, many things have happened with that plan over these decades, but I think we really think about it as this shift from an extraction-focused forest management plan to more of an ecosystem-based approach to thinking about our forests and to integrating science and conservation into that. So Peg tells the stories of how agencies and institutions managing all of these public forests are just struggling so much and up against so much to hold all these conflicting interests. There's the timber interests, the fire suppression, biodiversity protection, recreation, climate resilience, just to name a few. So there's a lot to explore here in that story, but one of the brief passages that I'd like to share highlights something that I think is really unique to Corvallis, the pivotal role that Corvallis researchers and the community has played in protecting these ancient forests for more than 5 decades, really for 7 decades, depending on how you look at it. So this is just a paragraph, but I wanted to. And so this, to just situate this a little bit more, this is talking about the community of researchers that are at the H.J. Andrews Experimental Forest, which is a research forest that is in the Cascades, just east of Eugene, and is a place where long-term ecological research has been happening for many decades, funded by the National Science Foundation, among other agencies. And it's a place where researchers had come together to take a long look at the forest when oftentimes grant cycles were like 1 to 3 years. Suddenly there are a group of researchers at the Andrews who had been given the reins to think about studying something for 5 or 10 or 20 or 200 years. And so by 1978, piles of scientific studies were beginning to merge into a scientific understanding of old growth forests. Variation was a constant feature. Variation in tree size, age, distribution, species, canopy structure, texture, light, and undergrowth. Heavy wood of various stages of decay characterized the forest floor and streams. Large, live trees and standing dead trees supported a floor-to-ceiling canopy. The complex structure of old forests created an abundance of habitats for myriad organisms. In sharp contrast, the researchers found that dense, rapidly growing conifer plantations were the most sterile forest type. By this time, the Andrews Group had fully absorbed the collaborative ethic of the International Biological Program, which had also funded research there for some time. They were unconcerned with distinctions between Forest Service and university employees or an individual's rank within these institutions. I remember that researchers in other parts of the country called it the Corvallis effect, although it included researchers from throughout the region. A collegial coalition that is rare among competing organizations, then and now. I think that moment's important for those of us here in Corvallis because that is very much still the case here. And there are, in these last 2 decades, really almost 3 decades now, more and more people have come into that fold of the Corvallis effect. And so now, in addition to these incredible researchers and scientists who are gaining a deep understanding of the forest, there are humanities scholars. And so there are philosophers and theologians and historians who have joined the scientists. There are also artists, composers, painters, writers, musicians, I mean, all kinds of artists who are, and everybody is coming together at the Andrews Forest and beyond to really think about and understand this forest, and also to think about how do we protect it? How do we make sure that this place, as much of it as possible, is safe for future generations? And Peg does, I think, a really beautiful job of telling that story and also capturing the importance of that kind of collaboration. And it's not just happening at the Andrews Forest and for the forest ecosystems. I think that collaborative ethic is one that has spread to other research communities in Corvallis and at OSU. But I really think that it was sparked with this community of researchers at the Andrews. And so I'll close with one more thing, and one last reason that I think this book is good for us is that in addition to all of this storytelling, it has very concrete suggestions about what to do if we want to save these ancient forests. And I will look at I'll share this as a way of something concrete to leave with. The Pacific temperate rainforest holds more biomass carbon than almost any other ecosystem. These forests are carbon rich, and with historically long intervals, I have not been flipping through pictures, I'm sorry, I'm gonna give you some more there. The forests are carbon rich, and with historically long intervals between wildfires and built-in resistance to fire, pests, and disease, they are likely to survive the challenges of climate change better than most. That is the idea behind a proposal to create strategic forest reserves that would halt logging on 50 million acres of publicly owned mature forests, while leaving younger forest and private tree plantations available for timber. Modeled on the nation's strategic petroleum reserve, which was created after the 1973 oil crisis to guard against future oil supply disruptions, strategic forest reserves would store carbon as a way to guard against future destabilizing climate shifts. A team of researchers headed by Beverly Law, a professor of global change biology, who was at OSU for many years, set out to identify forests within the United States that could serve as part of this proposed strategic reserve. The most promising forests would have high carbon density, high amounts of critical habitat, high species diversity, and a low chance of mortality from pest, disease, fire, and drought. Such forests would be primarily on federal land, where government regulations could install permanent protections. If protected, these forests would make strong contributions to biodiversity, water quality, and carbon storage throughout the foreseeable future. Not surprisingly, not surprisingly, forests with all these attributes are here in the Pacific temperate rainforest, where some of the most carbon-dense forests in the world can store carbon in trees for 600 years or more. Cutting down these big trees, Law says, is like robbing the Fort Knox of carbon reserves. Forest reserves in these high priority forests allow the most resilient, carbon-rich forests to persist when the planet needs them most urgently. Once you have harvested them, they're gone, Law says. The formula for clear cuts and tree farms is ecological destruction. We've seen the long-term effects of short-term logging in Oregon's Coast Range. Jobs dry up centuries before the forest recovers. The best strategies for storing carbon in these high-priority forests, law told Congress in 2021, is to restrict harvest of older forests on federal land and to lengthen harvest rotations. If mature, intact forests are allowed to grow, they will continue to store carbon, provide critical habitat, and purify air and water in perpetuity. If they are cut, they will release gigatons of carbon into the atmosphere, and it will take a human lifetime or more to reverse the effects of such logging. Keeping trees in the forest where they are already growing is one of the most effective, affordable ways to slow climate change. I think that's a good place to end. I'm grateful that that Peg devoted so much time, so much of her life to writing this book, and I think it's paved the way for other people to really dwell in this art, science, writing world. I'm grateful. I think the work that Peg and many of the people in this book that she interviews and highlights have paved the way for the kind of work that we're doing at OSU, that Spring Creek is doing, that Prax is doing. And I just wanted to make two little connections, and then I'm happy to be in conversation with you. One is that the long-term ecological research program at the H.J. Andrews that Peg mentions many times in this book has also a long-term ecological reflections program where we invite people, residents, to come to the forest to write and to create. And we just reopened that program to open applications for the first time in, I don't know, maybe it's been 4 years because we had fires and then we had all kinds of things happening, but those applications are open. And so if you or anyone you know wants to really spend time at the Andrews Forest thinking about this forest, those applications are due on January 5th. You've got plenty of time to think about that. And then another thing that I just wanted you to maybe pencil in on your calendars is on January 22nd at Prax, we will have the whole building is going to be taken over by art, science, writing, collaborations. There'll be 4 different exhibitions in all of the gallery spaces and a performance on the main stage at the concert hall that is highlighting 12 different collaborations between artists, scientists, and writers from across the world. There's one collaboration from Finland, and most of them are US-based. So if you're interested in expanding and being immersed in this kind of conversation, I think there's many ways to do that in Corvallis, and I welcome you into those spaces, and I'm happy to chat. Thanks. January 22nd is the date at Prax, and all that's on the Prax website. January 22nd. I'm sorry that I am not great at flipping through images while I'm talking, but I'll do that during Q&A so that we can see a few more of those. I wanted to get to this image so that you can also see, isn't this beautiful, this sketch? So that if you would like to, see more of the work and be more immersed in the work that Peg has done over the years, this is a gorgeous sketch of that work. They're also on the back table there so that you can check out those books and some other authors that are in deep conversation with this book. Thanks.
The event on January 22nd, does it have an embracing name? Because there are so many things going on at Prax, and when I look, I can't always find what I want.
Yeah, the question was, does the event on January 22nd have a name? Because there's so much going on in Prax. This afternoon, yes, We are working on a name. We are all working on a name for this event because one of the reasons that we're spending a lot of time on a name is because language matters a lot, but also because this will be an annual event where we're really celebrating art, science, and humanities collaborations. And so many of us are trying to figure out what the name of this is. So if anybody has inspiration, I'm open to that.
That's what Da Vinci Days was.
Yeah, that is what Da Vinci Days was. Yeah, that was such a wonderful celebration for so many years here. Yeah. I'll hold that as a possible name.
First of all, thank you. You did a really nice job, I think, of encapsulating and going over some of the highlights. One thing you alluded to that I really appreciated and I wanted to emphasize more is her ability to incorporate the different folks who are from the Pacific Northwest, who are doing the work on mycorrhizae and the forest plan and the photosynthesis, and that was really nice.
Yeah, there are so many people in this book who are mentors to me and an inspiration to me. And I think, you know, for those of you who have been in Corvallis, there'll be familiar names in this book. But even if you don't know any of these people, there's these beautiful sketches of the people and their work. And many of these researchers, as is the case with so many researchers, have devoted their lives to understanding really nuanced aspects of the forest and also how that relates to the bigger picture, not just of the forest, but also of the social overlays on the forest. And Peg's got them in here in this really wonderful way. Yeah.
One thing I really appreciated was, and you know, you were talking about things that stay with you. And I read this book quite a while ago, and one thing that has stayed with me is the distinction between an old forest and a plantation. And it seems kind of, somehow I've never heard them not being at odds before, whereas I felt like she presented it as, you know, of course we need wood and growing wood is fine, but that's not a forest. They're just different things. For me, that was really helpful.
Yeah, they're really different things. And I think thanks, that they are really different things. And I think one way that Peg talks about that, I think really early on in the book, she sets this up as these are wild forests. These are the wild ancient forests that this book is about, and the ones that are so critical to our future. Yeah.
And also the idea or the truth that you can't, that once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just not something that's intuitive. You think, well, you know, I think a lot of people think you just grow it back again.
Yeah, and you just don't, because, I mean, when you think about trees that are that old, so much is changing and the climate is changing, and you can't just plant and then say, okay, we're not going to touch this. And
She does a really good job of describing how long it took.
Yeah, and how there's ecosystems on all these different levels of, there's beautiful work in here and description of all these different ecosystems up the forest canopy, and so many of those take decades and centuries to establish. And when a forest comes down, when a tree comes down, it's not just that tree. There's so many things that are interconnected and depending on that tree and that forest. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, that's beautiful to remember. This is a great book to, you know, to read cover to cover, and then to dip back in before you go on a hike, or before people come from out of town and you're taking them up to the forest or something like that, to just be like, oh yeah, this, like, you know, let's think about this when we're in the forest this time. Great.
Can I just ask, do you have a sense of our forestry department at OSU and their, it's not one thing, I'm sure there's a lot of diversity inside that program, but do you know what their relationship is to these concepts, or?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. The forestry department has changed so dramatically, or the School of Forestry has changed so dramatically, and I think, you know, there's a lot going on there. A lot of the researchers at the Andrews are affiliated with OSU, and so there is this strong community of collaboration and thinking about the importance of old growth forests. There's also, very traditional timber views in the forestry. And so I think it's true to life, that there is that competition. I'm trying to think of the name of, if anybody can help me, the Forest Cultures and Society, there's a newer, something like that. I'm looking if there are anybody who could, which is a great, I think, invitation to be in this kind of thinking about the forests at OSU. Okay, I'm so happy to see all of you. Enjoy the forest and your afternoon. And
I had to laugh because you greeted me when I came in like you knew who I was.
Funny, and I am not.